What if I told you there was a connection, an economic union between Alberta and Alaska that you probably had no idea existed? A project so big that it would change the relationship between the state of Alaska and the province of Alberta forever. It would also bring massive change to Canada's north, including the Yukon and northern British Columbia, creating thousands of jobs for Americans in Alaska as well as Albertans.
A major infrastructure project cleared a significant hurdle, and it could lead to more exports from Canada's oil patch. The Alaska to Alberta Railway would start in the heart of the oil sands and serve as a transportation corridor to Anchorage and then on to Asia. But as Michael Couture reports, a number of steps remain before the project becomes a reality.
The proposed project is called the Alaska to Alberta Railway and would stretch more than 2,500 kilometers from Fort McMurray to the port in Anchorage. It's still in the planning stages, but the company is already talking about economic benefits for northern Canada.
This is going to bring 18,000 plus jobs during construction.
It's also being touted as a lifeline for other supplies to flow faster to northern communities. The project was just given a presidential permit to go ahead, but the issue could be on this side of the border. The Liberal government had been criticized by the courts for not properly consulting Indigenous communities on the Trans Mountain Pipeline project, leading to delays.
I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to follow up on a very exciting issue that I first raised in this House last month, the Alaska to Alberta Railway. I was glad to see in the news last month the announcement by the Alaska to Alberta Railway Development Corporation that they had secured the necessary American permit to move that project forward. This railway will be tremendously beneficial to Canadians for a number of reasons. First, the costs of this railway are all being paid for by the private sector. The Alaska to Alberta Railway Development Corporation is a private sector business that is willing to put up $17 billion of investors' money to move that project forward. The only ask of the federal government is to rubber stamp that permit so that the project can move ahead. Second, this project will create jobs, lots of jobs, 28,000 good, high-paying jobs for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and the rest of Western Canada.
A few years back, a private company called A2A Rail pitched a massive line running from northern Alberta up through the Yukon and into Alaska, opening a direct route to deep-sea water ports and moving Alberta resources to global markets faster. It was touted as a game changer with billions in investment and thousands of jobs. But in 2021, the project was paused. The CBC reported that A2A filed for creditor protection after its main financier collapsed and financial investigations surfaced. Fast forward to today, and the rail line isn't dead, it's just sitting on the shelf. Premier Danielle Smith and Alaska's governor met as recently as last year and said that they still see value in reviving the Fort McMurray to Alaska corridor, calling it a shared priority between the two jurisdictions. And here's the real takeaway. Even if the project is paused currently, it proves that Alberta and the United States share a lot more in common than Alberta does with the rest of Canada. I mean, literally, think about it. You have British Columbia, which is supposed to be part of the same country as Alberta, making it nearly impossible for Alberta to build a pipeline to the north, saying they're not interested in Alberta's dirty oil. And you have the governor of Alaska, just north of BC, saying, work with us. We'd be happy to have you. You're looking at two sides much more willing to work with each other in energy, trade, and transportation. Plus, they seem to have a lot more in common, culturally speaking, and priority-wise. This entire situation paints a very clear picture, especially when it comes to the topic of Alberta independence, or even Alberta 51. While so-called fellow Canadians in the BC government seem to be impossible to work with, the state of Alaska is more than ready to work with Alberta to bring our product to their ports. You also have a president in Washington, D.C. who approved the project previously very quickly and views Alberta with a favorable eye, unlike the Liberals in Ottawa. Seems fairly easy to decide which partner to work with, don't you think? Okay, so what has happened with this massive project? since they announced that it would be paused. The CBC had an article dated June 23rd, 2021, explaining what had happened up to that point. Title goes, Alberta to Alaska Rail Project files for creditor protection after lender goes into receivership. I guess bankruptcy. This is dated June of 2021. A2A Rail, the corporation pledging to build a $22 billion freight railway connecting Alaska and Alberta, had filed for creditor protection. The Calgary-based company said the protection will allow it to pursue a court-supervised sale or refinancing of the development stage of the project after its main lender, Bridging Finance, was placed in receivership in April. Quote, earlier this month, the court-appointed receiver of Bridging Finance, PricewaterhouseCoopers, called a $149 million loan made to A2A by Bridging Finance. To protect against the company's assets being liquidated, A2A obtained a creditor protection late Friday, the company said in a release Wednesday. Questions surround company's founder. A2A Rail said the refinancing process will not involve company founder Sean McCutcheon, and instead will be driven by a third-party consultant. An investigation by the Ontario Securities Commission found numerous financial irregularities surrounding McCutcheon's dealings with Bridging. The founder's name has been removed from A2A Rail's website. According to the Commission's investigation, one of McCutcheon's companies made $19.5 million in undisclosed payments to the personal checking account of Bridging CEO David Sharp during the same period that Bridging loaned more than $100 million to McCutcheon's other companies. Millions of dollars pledged for A2A Rail also went to McCutcheon's personal bank account and to an apparently unrelated company controlled by him. Oh boy, so there were financial shenanigans going on with the CEO, the main guy, apparently. Sharp closed his personal account just days after commission enforcement staff questioned him about his relationship with McCutcheon. Okay, so clearly something sketchy was going on with the company and its finances. And as of 2021, they went into bankruptcy at the time, basically. So that's what was happening up until 2021. We have more recent developments. As of 2024, last year, Premier Danielle Smith visited Alaska and met with the governor, and they both apparently spoke in regards to reviving this project and how essential it would be. Here's a tweet from Premier Danielle Smith, again from last year. I'm flying back from Alaska this morning, truly inspired. Despite a challenging landscape and climate, the Alaskan people have worked hard to build an incredible home. It reminds me a lot of Alberta. They're very similar. I had the great honor to attend the Alaska Sustainable Energy Conference and meet with key stakeholders within government, industry, and Indigenous communities over the past 2 days. I want to thank Governor Donlevy, however you pronounce it, and the Alaskan people for their hospitality. We forged new alliances and partnerships on this mission, and I'm excited of what the future holds for Alaska and Alberta. A lot friendlier, a much friendlier meeting than she's ever had with British Columbia, our fellow Canadians just west of us. Go figure. So here's an article from the Western Standard giving an update on the situation with this huge project connecting Alberta and Alaska. Title goes, Smith, Alaska Governor, tout rail line from Fort Mac at conference. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has reflated the idea of a 2,600-kilometer rail line from Fort McMurray to Anchorage, Alaska, with her Alaskan counterpart, Governor Mike Donlevy. Speaking at an energy conference in the state capital on the weekend, Smith and, let's call him Don, Smith and Don pitched the idea of reviving the line known as A2A between Delta Junction and Fort Mac via Fort Nelson, British Columbia. In 2020, then President Donald Trump issued a permit granting approval for the rail project, but it never got past the planning stages. In 2021, the company behind the project and the proposal went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy after racking up $212.9 million in debt. At the time of the filing, its only assets were consulting reports and intellectual property. That's the shenanigans that were going on back in 2021. Yikes. And you got the tweet from the premier about visiting Alaska. In 2021, the Ontario Securities Commission began investigating irregularities in the business dealings between the main financer of the A2A project, Bridging Finance, and A2A's president, Sean Makoshin. The OSC alleged that following the funding of loans to various Makoshin companies, Makoshin funneled a total of $19.5 million to Bridging CEO David Sharp. Yikes. Additionally, the OSC also alleged that millions of dollars pledged for A2A Rail also went to Makoshin's personal bank account and to an apparently unrelated company controlled by him. You're not going to tell me that such a massive, hugely significant project was stalled, paused, because of two crooks? Really? A project of continental significance being paused because of two allegedly corrupt men. Incredible. As of 2020, the project was estimated to cost $20 billion. Under the proposal, Alberta oil would have been shipped by rail to the Trans-Alaska pipeline terminal for export through Valdez on the coast. Port of Valdez, that is, just south of Anchorage. The idea has been floated in various incarnations since at least 1898. Incredible. This time, however, the link was seen as an alternative to the canceled Northern Gateway Pipeline project to Kitimat, British Columbia, which Premier Danielle Smith is pursuing today, by the way. And the Premier of British Columbia is making it impossible for her to do. So you have a massive project of epic proportions, something that would absolutely change the landscape for Canada's north as well as the state of Alaska, which unfortunately at this time is not connected to the rest of North America, to the rest of North America's rail connections. This would have made Alberta and Alaska significantly wealthier. And the project was paused, shelved, because two corrupt individuals were at the helm of the project, according to reports. But then, as recently as last year, you have Premier Smith meeting with the governor of Alaska, and the meeting was all positive. Apparently, both the governor and the premier indicated how important that particular project would be for both of their jurisdictions. I really hope to see a project like that be built. You know how big of a statement it would be that Premier Smith just signs a deal with Trump and the governor of Alaska to build that railway. I mean, unfortunately, at the end of the day, it still depends on Canada because Alberta is not connected to Alaska. It would have to go through northern BC or at the very least go up to the Northwest Territories, then get into the Yukon, and then get into Alaska. Unfortunately for Alberta, it doesn't have direct access to the state of Alaska. It does have access to Montana to the south, but it's not connected to Alaska. Incredible, though, to think that it's a lot easier to negotiate with American governors than it is to negotiate with fellow Canadian premiers. That's why Alberta independence is taking off. That's why most Albertans have given up on Canada. Hey, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to be notified every time a new video is published, hit the subscribe button and activate the notifications bell. It's completely free and it helps our channel grow. A heartfelt thank you to all our channel members. I really appreciate your support. See you all in the next one. Peace.